And my name is David Mantica. I'm the VPGM of SoftEd. Almost like it got cut off there. My email's down below. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well if you want to share any thoughts, ideas, questions with me after the session itself. And as you can hear from me, I love feedback, not just because it makes for a fun session for me, but it also helps others in the group share and be more confident in sharing, and we can learn from each other, because we're definitely going to learn from each other in this session. So, Agile for anyone. So the first thing we're going to talk about is belief, the idea of belief and how critically important belief is when you're tackling something like Agile as a way of working. Then we're going to talk about Agile being open and extendable. What does that actually mean? Then we're going to talk about values and principles from different flavors of Agile, and not just Agile IT project management, software project management. I don't even have the DevOps flavors here. DevOps is actually a flavor of Agile for deploying software and securing software during the deployment process, DevSecOps. But we're going to talk about, I'm going to be going more up the stack, meaning I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the business elements in this concept of business agility. Then we're going to talk about the core practices. So there are core practices, regardless of what flavor you're practicing in Agile, you have some core practices. We're going to talk about working iteratively. We're going to talk about this concept of self-organization. Some people call it self-direction. Some people call it self-management. We're going to get into the concept of a continuous learning, but I'm going to hit it from another angle. And then the self-leadership aspect, leading with agility. I think IC Agile is doing a magnificent job trying to point out that you have to certify yourself in working in an agile way first and foremost. You know, it's on the business agility track for IC Agile. And if you've never heard of IC Agile, it's the International Consortium for Agile. It's a certification body that focuses more on helping people matriculate through a curriculum than just taking a standard test. And that allows it to spread out and cover a lot of different areas, which is so critically important as Agile spreads into the business world. So, what do we remember here? Questions, comments. Feel free. If you have something that you've been thinking about, you don't want to share it because you feel weird, share it. So, if you're going to practice Agile, you got to really believe it. It's not something that you can just do. A lot of people talk, not a lot of people, I talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And I talk about it as it relates to business because it's no longer just teaching people about behaviors. First, for someone to truly get into something, they have to believe it. There's a belief there. We all have beliefs. We all have beliefs about ourselves, about the environments we work in. And from there, those beliefs are going to drive thoughts. And those thoughts are going to have feelings. You're going to develop feelings off those thoughts. And then finally, those thoughts and feelings together are going to direct and act and push your behaviors. In most normal training, especially IT training, even leadership training, even project management training, we try to teach at the behavioral level. Here, use this tool. Hey, use this process. Use this template. Do this, do that. And not get into the belief side of things. So when I talk about Agile for anyone, the first thing is there has to be a fundamental belief in this way of working, or it's very hard to actualize the behaviors because you'll always go back and think about it. If I truly don't believe it, I'll just go back to what I'm comfortable in. And all of us have been ingrained with a comfort level in a hierarchical leadership system. It's just natural for us. The classroom is a hierarchical system in most cases. You know, you work at any fast food restaurant or any regular restaurant, or you work in any type of semi-skilled or environment, it's going to be a hierarchical environment. That's what we get indoctrinated into. So if we're not believing, we're going to go back and work in a world that we call learned helplessness. And I'll get into those slides a little bit later. So As you listen to me talk about this Agile for anyone, do you believe it? Can you embrace this as a belief level? And if so, then you can start working on the practices and reinforcing the principles with the practices. So it's a mindset. We talked about this. It's a belief system. And in all types of Agile ways of working, you're going to have values and principles. Sometimes they're put together, sometimes they're separated. But values are going to be your base level beliefs. And your principles are going to be thoughts that you have associated with those beliefs, things that you can believe in and you're going to be thinking about as you're working. And then ultimately, you're going to exercise and manifest practices. Most of us, if we hear the word Agile, we're going to think about Scrum, a flavor of Agile. We're going to think about a Scrum Master. We're going to think about story points if you're in the IT space. You're going to think about iterations. These are all different types of practices. What usually misses in the Agile space, regardless if it's business agility, Agile for marketing, Agile project management in the software space, is we miss this idea of what the base level values are. And as you get into different flavors of Agile, you're going to see that they all will start with a form of manifesto. And that manifesto is going to talk about the values and the principles. Okay. So Agile's not just story point estimating. Agile's not just using a task board. Agile's not just managing your velocity. Agile's not just doing safe. If you have any questions or thoughts on that, let me know. So let's get into the manifestos. This has been the one that most of all of us have seen if we have some touches in Agile. This is the Agile Manifesto for software project management and software development. This manifesto is going to touch flavors like Scrum. It's going to touch flavors like extreme programming or paired programming. It's going to touch flavors like SAFe. It's going to touch flavors like Kanban. So these are flavors of Agile that have been developed for software development, project management, and actual coding itself. So you can see the value. If I'm going to walk in and I'm going to do Agile for software development, regardless of what flavor, I want to work with people and I want to interact. I want to build stuff. I want stuff. I want to hear back from the people I'm building for. And I want to respond to what their thoughts and feelings are. So all those things on the left are critical. You're going to have the things on the right, but as an Agilist, my belief is that I'm not going to put change in the box. I'm going to build so that I can change and change rapidly. Now I have to have processes by which what change we do and why, but I'm going to change. I want to hear what the customer has to say. I don't want to block the customer off after a stage in the development process. So that's the manifesto. Now, here are some interesting things. Now, let's look at the manifesto for Agile HR. So there is a flavor of Agile for human resources. There's a certification associated with Agile for HR. And there's lots of practices. Employee journey mapping is a practice for Agile HR. The idea of developing personas is a practice for Agile HR. But at base level, an HR professional is going to come into this and say, okay, collaborative networks. Okay, interesting. What does that mean? Well, most of us get uncomfortable when we think of HR because we think of bureaucracy or we think of a closed system that you can't enter in that closed system. We think of privacy. You know, whether that's true or not, that's where our brains go. So the Agile Manifesto is trying to pull out and get that system to believe in other things. Transparency, adaptability. Inspiration and engagement. Interesting. Look at this intrinsic motivation. You start learning in Agile HR about other forms of compensation. Other forms of compensation and building compensation models to support intrinsic motivation. And look at this ambition. Most of us see ambition as a negatively connotated word, meaning it's bad. We feel it's bad. Ambition, by its very definition, is not bad. It's about moving forward. It's about continuous improvement. It's about growing and learning. We can make it bad if we do things with our ambition that is going to hurt others, but ultimately it can be a very powerful tool in managing the people within an organization. And I'll look at the word transparency. If you go to Agile software development, you're going to see that word transparency. Agile software development project, they talk a lot about radical candor, which is an element of transparency. So you have elements inside of this manifesto that can be found in the software manifesto. Now let's look at the marketing manifesto. If there's anybody in marketing, please let me know. There is a flavor for Agile for marketing. It's actually been around quite some time, and it's probably the #1 non-IT flavor of Agile that has made lots of inroads into organizations. When I owned my company ASPE, we used an Agile marketing method in our marketing organization because we operated a lot like a marketing agency, although it was an internal group. So look at this first one. Marketing, you have a lot of people with opinions and ideas and thoughts without understanding whether it's right or wrong. So we want to validate. We want to test. We want to be adjustable, flexible. So this gets into this iterative mindset. There it is, responding to change. Remember, marketers build things, just like software developers build things. So there's got to be an element of responding to change. You have to have that belief to respond to change. Customer-focused collaboration. Look at it. See, you can start seeing here that some of the elements of marketing has a lot of ties to the software side because they're both producing. Not that HR organizations produce, but HR organizations also set a tone. With this scenario, marketers produce. So we want to have customer involvement. We want to work iteratively. We want to keep the collaboration going. We want to work in small experiments. So if we're going to do a big brochure, we want to do elements of that brochure and adjust and pivot over time. And last but not least, and again, questions, comments, thoughts. If you have anything you want to share, don't hesitate to throw it out there. Radical management principles. Radical management was a form of leadership using Agile mindsets developed by Stephen Denning. It was the first book that really said, okay, let's look at taking Agile elsewhere. I mean, that got popular. The book is Radical Management. And what Radical Management did is try to set the tone for how you can do business agility. Business agility is taking Agile ways of working into the operations of an organization. So you see elements of this. Absolutely, Bill, for sure. We want to embrace this. And you'll see why we want to embrace some of these things as we get deeper into some of the core practices. So that first one I use all the time now is delight the customer. So we got a question for Paul. How do these different Agile verticals for marketing, HR, etc. tie into each other? The thing is, they're going to tie in, Paul, at that base level value. That's why I wanted to show these things. You have ties about iterative work. You have ties about transparency. You have ties about customer collaboration. So what you do, what you're seeing is you see that there are a core set of principles, and I'm going to cover the 4 core practices that are in every one of these different Agile verticals, like you said, Paul. I'm going to cover the 4 that are in every single one of them. And what you'll find out is that really you can't have an agile way of working without having these 4 in it. So we'll get to that shortly, but great question. But I would tell you, the high level, you're going to see the connection of delighting your customers. You're going to, because that ties into value. You're going to see this idea of self-organization, because that's about empowerment. You're going to see iterative. It's about getting things done in shorter cycles so you can plan better. You're going to see the transparency issue, which is communicating honestly and directly. So those are some of the ties that you can see with these different flavors as I'm pointing out the principles of each one of the, but there's more. There's Agile Finance. I haven't included the principles of Agile Finance here. But if you go to IC Agile, you can see some of the definitions of what the manifesto or the principles of Agile Finance look like. But I talk about delighting your customers no matter what it's doing. So if I'm going to believe in Agile, I have to really believe in this idea of delighting my customers and understanding who my customer is. And if you see this, you can see how this can be used anywhere. The continuous self-improvement, we're going to get into that. The iterative work cycles, I'm going to get into that as well. But 2 great questions, and 1 great thought, 1 great question. So here's the tie. The tie is going to be in the 4 principles I'm going to talk about. But also the tie is into this modern agile guiding principles. So Alistair Coburn, one of the signees of the Agile Manifesto, wrote down, looking at the principles and the values, looking at where Agile was going into other areas. And Paul, this is the map. Regardless of where you're going, you're going to see the concept of making people awesome. You're going to be seeing the concept of experimentation and learning. Safety, because you can't experiment without safety. And then delivering value. That's the delighting the customer aspect. So these are the 4 elements. Modern agility, regardless of whether you're doing software, Scrum, Safe, Kanban, whether you're practicing radical management, whether you're practicing Agile for HR, whether you're doing lean practices, this is it. We make people awesome. They are higher. There's a higher level of productivity. They break through the learned helplessness structures of problems that we face in our way we look at work. You experiment because change happens too rapidly, so we have to experiment. But you have to learn. You just don't experiment for experimentation. You don't just do it to do it. There's a reason, and it's that learning aspect. Value. We have to in order to stay relevant. You can run your life in an agile way. You can run your career in an agile way. You make people awesome in your career, you're going to build a great network. You deliver value, you're going to constantly make people happy, and you're going to make your customers happy. If you experiment, you're going to be upgrading your product faster. You're going to be testing new areas. You're going to learn and adapt. And finally, with you as a product, if you run your career agilely, you're going to have the confidence that you can deal with any disruption that's going to happen because you believe in yourself as a product. So you can see where I could take this agile guiding principles and I could create for you, for your product, I could create something called career insurance, the agile way of managing your career. And I could give you practices that tie into that, but those practices are useless if the person practicing career insurance, which is an agile way of managing your career, they don't embrace these 4 things. So, mindsets. So now as you start building your beliefs, you're going to be building out some mindsets. I want problems. Problems help me learn. I have to grow. I don't have to do everything all at once. Why silo? Can we cross over and work together? The only way you get the power out of everyone is through self-organization. You can have a plan, but you know it's always going to evolve. I mean, I can go through each one of these, but as you start looking at these, you might say, yeah, I believe in that. I believe in that, but let's go back to the opposite and have you practiced that before? Or are some of your organizational structures practicing that? So regardless of where you're doing Agile, this map has, this has to pop up. And you have to look at it and say, where are we falling back to traditional mindsets that are blocking our ability to do the 4 core values? Making people awesome, experimenting and learning, creating value, delighting our customers. I mean, these things are critical. And the 4th one being safety. Sorry, I forgot that one. So again, any comments or thoughts? So we're going to make a transition now. We're going to make transition into the different practices, different critical practices. Any comments or thoughts before I make that transition? I'll take a drink of water and see. And silence is not scary. Trying to give you some time to think a little bit. All right. Iterative work. This is a practice. Iterative working, embracing it. There's a snapshot. Some of us like to, when we do our kitchen, we're going to get the big architectural plan. It's going to cover all aspects. Once we have that, we're going to analyze to make sure we haven't missed anything. We're going to do pricing. Then the contractor is going to give us a plan. Then they're going to build. Then you're going to do a punch list. And then you have a live kitchen. All right. We all know what happens during that process. I didn't like the way the color looked. I'm going to repaint. I didn't like that hardware up against what I picked for the quartz or granite countertops. Oh, that tile's not in stock anymore, so we have to find a new backsplash. All these things happen. So if you want to embrace iterative work by redoing your kitchen, you might build an overall architectural diagram. So you have the roadmap, but then you take pieces of it in a sprint fashion. You may start off by painting the cabinets, which a lot of people, instead of changing their cabinets, paint them. Then you look at the color. How does that look? How does that feel? Then they may do the flooring next. Okay, let me see how that flooring matches my painted cabinets. All right, the flooring's done. Then, all right, let's look at the hardware for the cabinets. All right, then let's put in the new appliances. Now you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, that's going to take 1,000 times longer than the top one. No, they should both finish off at the same time. It's just what you're doing is during each stoppage, you're looking at it. You're thinking about it. You're evaluating it. And you're making decisions. Maybe I'm going to go back when I paint and I'm going to repaint it. Or maybe when I get to the tile, I still have a couple other things to do. I'm going to decide to go back and repaint because now I look at it and I need to repaint. It's an agile way of iterative work structure to break down something that is usually a pre-planned box and acts across the board. And then it's hard to go back and restage it. Now, look, if you're in construction management, there's a lot of pitfalls associated with that. Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is this mindset that each iteration gives you an output. That output is something that you can look at. That output is something you can touch. It's tangible, so you can make comments on it. Picture's worth 1,000 words. It's so much more powerful to actually see it. And as you're doing outputs, you can test, although it gets more costly to go back to sprint 1 at sprint 5, you can still do it. It's less costly than have to make a change after go live, after punch list. You know, you can just imagine what you have to do if you want to then change out the cabinets. You're going to pull all the countertop up, redo everything. You're going to scuff up the floor. There's so much that could go wrong. So what you're getting is you're getting closer to the future in your predictive mindset. That's what iterative does. At each stage, you get closer to the future. Instead of making your analysis and requirements gathering and planning, up front, you're going to be able to do that in microchasms throughout and adjust accordingly, because it's all about volatility. You're doing this iterative work structure because you understand that things are volatile and the cost of change is so high. The cost of change is so high when you are locked in. So you got these business value snapshots associated with Agile. The thing about Agile, about risk, is that you reduce your risk significantly because you are stopping and reevaluating. Things aren't hidden. In any type of traditional work process, the work is happening all at once, overlapping, connected. You can't see where the problems may lie, because someone might be working on something that in an iteration could have happened in sprint 2, but that's worked on through the course of the project and then is deployed at the same time. So you don't see that problem until that deployed spot. You don't see the problem with the tile until the end of the project. You don't see the problem with the paint color till the end of the project. And then all that necessary, you're going to risk, dirtying up the new countertops because of the paint job you have to do, scratching it, dropping the, blah, 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 blah. And then the value attribute here, when you use Agile right, is twofold. One is that since you're outputting, you can utilize some of that output sooner. You may just go through the project and decide that after countertops and paint, you don't want to change anymore because you've reached your value quota. My gosh, this is perfect. I don't need anything else. I like my appliances. It matches better. Oh my, it looks so much better. So you're going to reduce a significant amount of cost in that top right-hand diagram, and you're going to get a significant amount of value earlier in the stages. The most important thing that Agile provides when you work iteratively is being able to stop and protect yourself from trying to overplan. So going back to these slides, at that requirements gathering scenario in a more traditional project mentality, you're going to protect yourself from the future. You're going to protect yourself from the future by throwing a lot of stuff into the planning process just in case. So when you go back to value, if you work iteratively, you aren't necessarily going to do that because you get time to recheck. Some people call it trimming the tail. Some people calling it the definition of done. But ultimately, you get to a value position faster with reduced costs. And that's really, when done right, that happens. And then certainly from a payback scenario, the same situation. You're deep in the project. You have all your costs in it. Meanwhile, if you can roll stuff out, you can start achieving value sooner. You might be able to pre-sell certain functions, certain scenarios. And even if it's talking about the economic term called utility, like I talked about in the kitchen remodeling, you can get a much level return on utility faster because you might say, wow, that's all I need. So I maximize my happiness. I maximize my delight. And profit can be delight. So these are some of the pictures here that gives a better understanding of business value. And for me, as a business person, throughout my entire career, I ran my own business, sold it successfully. And one of the things I learned was I wanted to reduce the amount of work that was going to be done on something that wasn't going to work. I wanted to learn as fast as possible if something wasn't going to work. And I wanted to manage my risk. So we would plan and budget, and we would have a full year budget, but then we would plan and execute the budget elements in 2-month cycles. So I could adjust and pivot. I wasn't locked in because I was reducing my risk. The plan was there, but I was executing that plan and reevaluating that plan in 2-month cycles. And I would be rolling out new products to the marketplace in smaller segments, and then having a learning criteria associated with it. So any questions or thought on iterative? Anything you want to share there? Anything that didn't quite make sense? Please don't hesitate to type it in. Hey, David, I don't agree with this because of this, this, and this. Great. That's information that can be shared with somebody else. So self-organization. We have to learn how to do this. In knowledge work, in complex and complicated environments, we need to pull the most out of every person on the team. And the only way to do that is by empowering them to do it. Now, what's going on is that we're not teaching this yet. We are still doing a very poor job teaching people how to self-organize, how to take on the responsibility of self-management. Because there's a basis of fear here, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. But ultimately, when dealing with complexity, the more people thinking in an environment of safety, the better. So self-organization is at the locus of the work. At the point by which the work is getting done, the individuals in the group are making decisions, not just one person, not just one person. The problem in self-organization is that for natural systems, it works perfectly. But in human systems, we tend towards a representative form of leadership. Our whole governmental systems is a representative form of leadership. Our democracy is a representative democracy. It's not a true democracy. So we have a tendency in any type of church group, all the type of trade associations I know of, a leadership team is selected. And that leadership team then might have a tighter leadership group, and that's where the decisions are made. So I'm not going to debate the pro and con of that. What I'm going to say is that when tackling complex and complicated environment problems, challenges, and dealing with a group of highly intelligent people, you have to find a way to make sure all of them are empowered to decide at the point by which they do the work. They can pivot and they can adjust. They don't have to follow a message map, or they don't have to follow a work structure map. They can adjust to get to the outcome. They know what the outcome is. They know what value for the customer is, and they're adjusting and pivoting accordingly to achieve that value. But in order to do this, our leadership structures have to first treat people like an adult. Each one of us are adults in the working environment. And there's a responsibility in that adulthood. I'm going to go over these slides pretty quickly, but I do a whole session on self-organization, which I dive deeper into this. Ultimately, we have to understand autonomy. To truly be self-organized, us individually, each one of us have to understand truly what autonomy means and the true power of autonomy. And the organization has to accept that. You just can't give partial autonomy. It's actually worse than doing dictatorial leadership, is giving partial autonomy, because then people get confused. And that confusion turns into frustration. That frustration is the worst thing that you can produce in working environments. And that's one of the first questions I ask people in job interviews is, how do you handle frustration? And in an organization that says they're self-organized but doesn't truly embrace autonomy, creates a lot of frustration because there's angst and you don't know what to expect or when to expect it. That level of consistency. So ultimately, it's the idea that we are empowered to make decisions for where we're at and what we're doing. We're empowered to make those decisions. A lot of times it ties in the human systems, it ties to financial autonomy. If you have financial autonomy, then you can make any decision you want because you are paying for it. I wanted that. And when I was 18 years old, I didn't want to be told what to do. I wanted to live my existence in autonomy. So I took on my financial responsibility all myself. And, I had to learn through a lot of mistakes. but I knew what autonomy was at that point, and I knew what was the element of autonomy for me. So employees have responsibility in autonomy. The problem is employees don't necessarily naturally want autonomy. If I can make the same amount of money making no decisions, and I make making decisions, which way do you want to be? This is one of the biggest struggles when people try to deploy Agile, is they deploy Agile into an environment that is used to having decisions made for it, and they just expect people to change. I just expect you to become autonomous. It's not true. I mean, we put ourselves in certain environments. Again, Agile's not the end-all, know-all. And there's elements of this that you can pull into play. But ultimately, if you're going to be Agile, you have to accept that level of autonomy. And look at that last bullet. It's about making a commitment. It's not all about you. It's not all about you. You are part of the system in the autonomy. So you are making decisions to stay there. The basics of economics is decision-making. I actually listened to a great NPR podcast the other day on Steinfeld economics. You know, the show that means nothing, but the reality is the show is all about decision-making. Might be goofy decision-making about what suit to eat or whether to give money for a wedding or whatever the case may be, all the crazy stuff they talked about. We make decisions, and the decision to be autonomous, the decision to accept autonomy, we have responsibilities in that. But also the company has responsibilities. So this is, to me, this is where most of the Agile failures occur, regardless of what flavor you're doing, is the understanding of responsibility of autonomy for both the employee and the employer. We're not really teaching people what this really means and what each side has to give up or what each side has to accept in order to do it. And the fact that it's not natural. It's not natural for us to be autonomous. All right. Any comments or thoughts on self-organization? All right, we got 2 done. We got 2 more to go. You're definitely going to get out of here on time, so no worries about that. We're going to get into learning, and this is my favorite piece of this, and I'm going to take it from a different direction. Continuous learning. Shurahi or Shuraha, they talk about that a lot in Agile, the idea you learn, then you transcend and you're just doing it. Daniel Kahneman talks about that in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, when you get into the flow. But I'm going to take a step back and ask you, do you really know how to learn and where you learn? This is pulled out of the book Practical Adaptive Leadership by Roy Heifetz and Martin Litsky. And really what it's saying here is that we truly learn at a point that point associated with disequilibrium, where we're comfortable being uncomfortable. So Bill and William, you asked, how do you prevent chaos if everyone is able to make their own decisions, right? So there you go. Bill, that's a great point, right? And so if you go back to the slide, there are some things that you have to accept. The employee has to accept the core values of the organization. The employee has to accept the goals associated with the organization. Autonomy, you're not going to set the corporate goals. You're not going to set the department goals. Remember, in self-organization, it's not a servant leader. It's a leader as a host. Your leader has responsibilities. That leader is responsible for creating the values of the organization, creating the goals, changing and adjusting the goals accordingly, communicating whether you're achieving those goals or not. And as part of being autonomous, you have to accept those goals. If you accept those goals, then you work within a box. And in that box, you make decisions. Remember, I'm not telling you to make decisions across all the company. I'm saying making decisions at the locus, at that locus of your work. That's where self-organization is. Hey, I know I'm a great project manager. I'm not going to tell you how to market, but don't tell me how to do my project plan. Don't tell me when I'm supposed to get something done. Let me figure that out. Let me figure out what resources are needed. Let me figure out with the team how to get faster. So that's the thought, Bill. Bill, phenomenal question. Thank you for sharing that. So you can't really learn if you're in avoidance. This is the land of learned helplessness. This is the land of being comfortable where you're at. used to call this falling asleep. Why learn? You're going to take a training class and in this space, you don't care. You're going to forget it immediately. I don't need it. Why am I even there? Then on the red zone, is you're so busy, someone's trying to show you something new. You're so busy, you're so stressed out, you're never going to listen. Someone's trying to bring in some new ideas. Shut up before I go crazy. You're going to push it away. So we have to look inside ourselves for continuous learning and find when we're in that green zone, we have psychological safety. We feel we got some distress, but we're getting things done. And I have to learn more to get things done. I mean, when I used to fall asleep at the company I owned, I would have to go back and get woken up. And I had my resources to get woken up. But I could tell you how easy it was for me to fall asleep. So we have to actively be thinking about how do we put ourselves in this distress zone, and then when to turn down the heat. So continuous learning, it's really good on paper, but we don't teach anyone how to do it properly. So when you're looking at continuous learning, you want heat. How do you turn on the heat? How do you turn off the heat? So for you, if you want to turn up the heat in the given system, you want to give up responsibility. You want to let conflict occur so you can adjust and pivot accordingly. You want to protect the folks who are dissenting respectfully. And finally, you want to go out there and look for other ideas, look for other thoughts. Think about that. When you're in the red zone, you want nothing to do with conflict. It's going to slow you down. You want nothing to do with the Chicken Little over there screaming and yelling that this isn't going to work. But what I'm saying, if you want to learn, conflict, dissenting voices, others' perspectives, and being able to be in the mindset to be able to process that appropriately. Part of learning, I have a slide on in the Art and Science of Learning presentation I do around cognitive diversity driving this. The reality is we're uncomfortable when people are different from us. So that uncomfortableness affects our ability to be in the green zone. We go back and we fall back to the yellow zone, or we get really angry and agitated. So ultimately, where can you put yourself at that maximum point of learning? The number one way I say in work environments is stretch assignments. Asking for responsibility to do something that's beyond your current skill set. And then asking for protection because you know that I'm learning and you're going to get so much more value out of me after I learn. So you got to be right in that zone there, the panic zone versus the learning zone. Where are you at? And that's where you're going to get the maximum level of learning. When I learned the most when I was the GM of the Canadian operation for Global Knowledge, I was very young. I had complete safety. I felt I was safe. I was needed. And I could just absorb and learn. It was stressful. And it was crazy work hours. But I felt like I came out of that saying, oh my gosh, look at all that I learned. And I really had a respect for the organization to allow me to learn and grow. They got a lot out of me, a cheaper resource to go out there and run this country as they're going through transition. Now, finally, the last thing about continuous improvement, continuous learning is the idea to unlearn. The book is by Barry O'Reilly. The thing you want to think about is in rapid pace of change, you can only put so much into the bottle of our brains. What you want to do is start thinking about what are the things you're going to pull out because you know that they're no longer useful. The problem is we like all of our experience. We put value on that experience. That's a medium of exchange for us to get better salaries. But what I'm saying is a better medium of exchange now is show how you can continuously learn. Because experience can bring you down. Experience can actually cause you problems. Whereas if you can point to your ability to unlearn, to continuously learn, to be able to drive through learning and that productive distress, there's more value there. And I'll leave you with the doctors in the world. The doctors, the whole knowledge base of doctoring can change in like 2 to 3 years these days. So which doctor do you want to work with? The one that unlearns or the one that keeps with the stuff that they have, which means that they have less time to learn the stuff that they should be learning. We're going to finish this with leading with agility. So finally, if you want to be agile, you have to lead. And guess what? It's you. Agile starts with you. Agile starts with the individual person. So to lead with agility, you have to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I could spend 30 minutes just on this slide. When you get up in the morning, what are you telling yourself? What are you really saying to yourself when you wake up in the morning? Are you processing that? And what are you catching? Look at that left side. Where are you at with that? Self-evaluation is important here because I point out that most of us, including myself, woke up this morning with a fixed mindset. It's our natural tendency. Our brains have evolved for pessimism. We're naturally inclined to look at the negative side of things. It's a protective mechanism. So you have to fight that every day to go back to that growth mindset. Leading with agility means you are not going to suffer from learned helplessness. You're not going to allow yourself to go back and be told what to do and get comfortable with it. That's how our entire leadership structure has been built off of for the last 300 years. Even our educational system is based on the British shipping system, the bureaucracy needed to run a complex and complicated shipping system. Reading, writing, arithmetic, you do work and you do how you're told, and then people monitor it, and the monitors tell you if they're doing it wrong, and then it gets done right. That fails, it completely falls apart when volatility hits. It completely falls apart when ambiguity hits. It completely falls apart when uncertainty hits. And that's what a lot of us are facing now. In the face of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the hierarchical learned helplessness business structure falls apart. So you have to catch yourself here. You have to monitor it because it's pessimism. We're going to be pessimistic. We're going to look towards us as a fixed mindset, protection mechanism. We're going to let other people make decisions for us because it's a protection mechanism. Decision-making means autonomy, means responsibility, means somebody could hold me accountable. I don't want to be held accountable. And for many years of work, you weren't held accountable except for getting that piece of work done the way you were told to do it. Great, Bill. I love the growth mindset slide as well. And then as you're leading with agility, you have to understand what psychological safety is. It goes back and overlays into the learning slide. But basically, the end tenet of psychological safety is this. Nobody can make you psychologically safe except yourself. I can build the best psychologically safe culture on earth, but you still have to accept it. I am safe. So if you think you're going to get laid off, it doesn't matter. I am safe because I can find another job. You know, things are changing. I am safe because I can learn quickly and I can adjust. I am safe because I've accepted the fact that I trust the organization, and that doesn't make me stupid, but I'm going to go because I shouldn't trust anyone. Psychological safety is based on the concept of you deciding if you're psychologically safe. And then you can look at the slide after the fact. We'll send it out, but here are some enabling elements associated with psychological safety. Consistency, over-communicate, transparency, and then letting people know why or why not you went with what they were thinking on the leadership side. For yourself, you enable psychological safety by being confident in who you are, confident in the skills you have, and consistently learning. The best psychological safety tool is constant learning, and then putting that learning to practice. So we have the leadership culture. Agile leadership is not about being nice. Some of the most unlikable people on the planet are nice people. Agile leadership is about building trust, opening up for autonomy, allowing self-organization to occur, working iteratively, right? And allowing people to learn. And ultimately, what we want to do is if we start leading with agility, leadership starts with us. We drive with the growth mindset. We break out of the pattern of learned helplessness. We embrace safety. We are safe. We are safe. And because of that, we're building environments that you can learn, adjust, pivot, learn, adjust, pivot. And then you're getting down to being an adaptive leader. An adaptive leader in the high levels of volatility, the essential from the expendable. You know what's important. You know what's not important. That's the unlearning element. And you realize that the status quo is an invisible killer. You're constantly looking and adjusting and pivoting and thinking about the status quo. And I'll tell you this, it starts with you as a product. How long have you sat in the status quo of your current skill sets? Where have you pushed yourself to start building other skill sets so you can break through that status quo, so you can build the essential skills needed for the next generation of workers? That's running your career from an agile perspective. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. I left you with 3 to 5 minutes to spare. Questions, comments, thoughts. You're going to get the slides. You get the recording as well. Absolutely love being a part of this. Thoughts, comments. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Modu. No problem, Paul. Love it. Thank you for your engagement. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Want to talk to you about career insurance? If you want to dig into that a little bit more, just send me a note out. Remember that you got the 4 elements: iterative, self-organization, continuous learning, and leading with agility. That's Agile basics. They're in every flavor. And then finally, the heart of Agile: experiment, safety. What else is it? Delighting your customer. And I forgot what the other one was, but you can see it in the slides. Anyway, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.